We're letting you go, Amara, effective immediately. Fiona, our Director of Human Resources, slid the termination paperwork across the cold glass of the boardroom table. She didn't make eye contact. Next to her sat Julian, the Senior Vice President of Operations. He leaned back in his expensive leather chair, a smug, self-satisfied smile playing on his lips. Your attitude has become a massive liability to this department, Julian added, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke suit. You're arrogant, insubordinate, and you clearly think you're smarter than the executive team. Vanguard Logistics needs collaborative team players, not rogue managers running unauthorized software projects on company time. My name is Amara. I am a 35-year-old black woman who spent the last 7 years serving as the invisible spine of Vanguard Logistics. I was the one pulling 80-hour weeks. I was the one fixing the catastrophic supply chain bottlenecks Julian caused. Julian was a classic corporate nepotism. Hire a man who spoke entirely in hollow buzzwords like synergy and paradigm shift, while possessing zero understanding of how global freight actually moved. He built his lucrative career by standing squarely on my shoulders. I looked down at the paperwork. They were firing me for cause, specifically citing unauthorized use of company servers to build what Julian assumed was a personal coding hobby. Julian, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. The logistics software currently managing our West Coast Hubs Project Titan requires specific administrative oversight. If you revoke my credentials, you will disrupt the API integrations across our entire network. Julian scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. Don't flatter yourself, Amara. You're just a middle manager. We have an entire IT department to handle your little program. Hand over your badge. Security will escort you out. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I picked up the heavy metal pen and signed the documents with a smooth, confident flourish. You're absolutely right. I smiled, dropping my badge on the table. I really should focus on my own company. Good luck managing Titan without me. The crisp morning air hit my face as I walked out of the towering Vanguard Logistics headquarters in Chicago. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The corporate email icon vanished from my screen, replaced by a gray, access denied notification. Fiona's HR team was ruthlessly efficient. They had already purged my employee profile from the Active Directory. They thought they were simply locking out a disgruntled mid-level manager. They had no idea they had just triggered the exact mechanism that would bring their billion-dollar empire to its knees. While Vanguard executives played golf and took 3-hour martini lunches, I had spent my nights building an escape route. Project Titan wasn't a hobby. It was an advanced AI logistics platform I coded from scratch, capable of predicting market fluctuations, managing fleet temperatures, and routing freight in real time. Vanguard was bleeding cash under Julian's leadership, so I integrated Titan into their failing infrastructure to keep the company afloat. But Julian never bothered to read the technical documentation. He never reviewed the end-user license agreements. If he had, he would have known that Vanguard didn't own Project Titan. It was exclusively licensed to a third-party vendor named Apex Systems, and a simple public record search would have revealed that I was the sole founder and CEO of Apex Systems. Sitting in my car, I opened my encrypted tablet. The screen displayed rows of green code that suddenly flashed yellow. By deleting my master employee ID, Vanguard had broken the authorized user agreement. Apex Systems' automated security protocol engaged. It wasn't a sudden crash. It was a methodical 36-hour decoupling process to ensure data integrity before full license revocation. In exactly a day and a half, Vanguard's entire AI routing network would vanish. Thousands of trucks would lose their manifests. Cargo ships would lose port coordinates. I started my engine, feeling a profound sense of liberation. Julian wanted to steal my credit. Instead, he had just handed me the digital keys to his absolute destruction. That evening, I attended a mandatory industry networking mixer hosted by the Chicago Logistics Association. I had RSVP'd weeks ago, and getting fired wasn't going to stop me from enjoying the open bar. I stood near the cocktail tables when I heard a sharp, mocking laugh. It was Sarah, Vanguard's director of procurement, accompanied by Richard, our chief financial officer. Sarah was Julian's loyal lackey, a master of stealing credit and backstabbing peers. Richard was the corrupt financial shield who approved Julian's bloated departmental budgets. Well, Finn, if it isn't the rogue coder, Sarah sneered, swirling her martini. I heard Julian finally marched you out today. It's a shame. Amara, you used to be such a hard worker before you got so arrogant. Richard took a sip of his expensive scotch, looking at me with pure condescension. You should have stayed in your lane, Amara. Corporate America doesn't reward insubordination. I'll make sure HR flags your file. Good luck finding a job in this city with a termination for gross misconduct on your record. They were the ultimate toxic corporate clique, thriving on intimidation and office politics. I appreciate the concern, Richard, I replied calmly, but I think my career will survive Julian's temper tantrum. Before Sarah could deliver another insult, a man in a sharp suit walked past our table. It was David, a senior forensic auditor for a Big Four accounting firm that Vanguard frequently contracted. David was brilliant, strictly professional, and despised Richard's sloppy accounting practices. As David brushed past me, he subtly bumped my shoulder, slipping a folded cocktail napkin into my hand without breaking his stride. Richard rolled his eyes and led Sarah away toward the VIP section, leaving me alone. I walked over to a quiet corner and unfolded the napkin. Written in precise blue ink were two sentences: Titan's beta license is failing. Vanguard servers are hemorrhaging data. Hold your ground. I looked across the room. David was standing by the bar, giving me a microscopic, knowing nod. The 36-hour countdown was accelerating. Tuesday morning hit Vanguard Logistics like a Category 5 hurricane. I sat in my real office, a sleek high-rise executive suite at Apex Systems, watching the Vanguard dashboard light up with critical failures. The 36-hour decoupling phase had finished. The AI completely vanished. At Vanguard, absolute chaos reigned. 300 transport trucks sat idle at a massive port in Los Angeles, unable to receive their loading manifests. 40 freight ships were floating aimlessly off the eastern seaboard because their docking coordinates had been erased. Warehouse managers were screaming at dispatchers who were staring at completely blank monitors. Inside his glass-walled office, Julian was sweating through his bespoke suit. His desk phone rang relentlessly. Regional directors were threatening to quit. Major international clients were threatening lawsuits. He frantically called Vanguard's IT department, demanding they fix the software. We can't, the chief information officer told him bluntly over the speakerphone. Apex Systems initiated a complete firewall block. We don't own the code. Julian, we lease it, and their system just revoked our access. Julian snatched his cell phone, his hands shaking violently, and dialed the Apex Systems corporate support line. I watched his number pop up on my caller ID. I let it ring. This is Julian from Vanguard. He left a frantic voicemail, his usual arrogance completely stripped away. We have a massive glitch. I need your technical team immediately. Name your consulting price. Please call me back. 10 minutes later, Fiona burst into Julian's office, clutching a stack of legal binders. The East Coast supply chain is frozen, she shrilled. We need to send Apex an immediate cease and desist. We'll sue them for breach of contract. Fiona was desperately looking for a legal scapegoat, completely oblivious to the irony. She was the one who authorized the deletion of my profile. She had personally severed the only authorized link keeping the software active. They were standing inside a burning corporate building, desperately trying to figure out who started the fire, entirely unaware they were holding the matches. By Tuesday afternoon, the financial damage to Vanguard was calculating in the millions. My private cell phone vibrated on my walnut desk. The caller ID displayed Richard, Vanguard's CFO. I answered, putting him on speaker. Listen to me very carefully, Amara, Richard snarled, dropping any pretense of professionalism. His voice echoed with barely contained panic. I don't know what kind of malicious virus you installed before you left, but you are going to give us the administrative passwords right now. I don't work for you, Richard, I replied smoothly, taking a sip of sparkling water. And there is no virus. You revoked my credentials. The system reacted. I will ruin you, Richard shouted. I have Vanguard's legal team drafting a massive lawsuit for corporate sabotage and violating your non-compete clause. I will personally ensure you are blacklisted from every logistics firm in North America. You will be bankrupt by Friday if you don't turn that system back on. It was the classic corporate bullying tactic, threatening endless litigation to crush a former employee. But I wasn't a defenseless subordinate anymore. Your non-compete is completely unenforceable, Richard, I stated coldly, and you can't sue a third-party vendor for enforcing their own security protocols. Check your IT logs. Jin. I hung up the phone. A moment later, my encrypted corporate line rang. It was David, the external auditor. I'm currently standing in a soundproof server room at Vanguard headquarters, David said, his voice low. The board of directors panicked and called my firm to assess the financial hemorrhage. It's an absolute bloodbath in here. They are losing $200,000 an hour. Is Julian blaming me? I asked. He sent a memo claiming you hacked them out of petty revenge, David confirmed. But the chairman of Vanguard just flew in from New York. He isn't buying Julian's lies. He just demanded that the CEO of Apex Systems be brought to the boardroom immediately for an emergency session. I smiled, closing my laptop. Tell the chairman I will be there in exactly 1 hour. I stepped out of my black town car at exactly noon on Wednesday. I wasn't wearing my usual mid-level manager attire. I wore a tailored charcoal executive suit, a crisp white blouse, and my hair was flawlessly styled. I looked exactly like the CEO of a multi-million-dollar technology firm. I walked through the revolving doors of Vanguard Logistics. The lobby was a war zone of frantic executives and ringing phones. The senior security guard, the same one who had escorted me out 2 days ago, saw me approach. His hand hovered nervously over his radio, ready to call for backup. I didn't break my stride. I locked eyes with him, projecting untouchable authority, and swiped a master VIP access card I had generated from the Apex servers. The turnstile flashed green. He froze, too stunned to speak, as I stepped into the private executive elevator. The top floor was dead silent. The terrified junior staff watched in shock as I bypassed my old cubicle and walked directly toward the main executive boardroom. Through the glass walls, I saw the Vanguard board of directors. The chairman, a ruthless veteran of corporate restructuring, sat at the head of the mahogany table. Julian was pacing near the projector, sweating profusely. Fiona sat rigidly in the corner. Richard was frantically reviewing financial spreadsheets. I pushed the heavy glass doors open. The thick metal hinges glided silently, but the movement drew every eye in the room. Julian's face contorted from exhaustion into pure, unadulterated panic. His brain couldn't process the image of his former subordinate standing before him with absolute confidence. "Security," Julian shrieked, his voice cracking violently. "Fiona, call the guards. What is she doing here? She's the rogue employee. Get her out before the Apex CEO arrives." I didn't flinch. I walked straight past his flailing form, approached the head of the table, and opened my leather briefcase. "Enough," the chairman barked, silencing Julian instantly. He looked at my tailored suit and the pristine legal folder in my hands. He recognized power when he saw it. "Who let you in?" he asked coldly. I slid a heavy gold-embossed business card across the table. "Nobody let me in," I stated clearly. "You requested the CEO of Apex Systems. I am here." The silence that followed was absolute perfection. Julian stared at the gold embossed card as if it were a live explosive. The color drained completely from his face, leaving a sickly gray pallor. Next to him, Fiona dropped her pen. It clattered loudly against the floor. She realized in real time that she had personally processed the termination of the single most important vendor holding their company together. Richard, the arrogant CFO, slowly sank into his chair, looking as if the air had been punched out of his lungs. The chairman picked up the card, read my title, and let out a low, humorless chuckle. He leaned back, giving me his full, undivided attention. "As you advised me on Monday, Julian," I said, locking my icy gaze onto my former boss. "I really needed to focus on my own company. Shall we review the damage your HR department caused?" I pulled a stack of diagnostic reports from my folder and slid them to the board. Vanguard has been utilizing a beta version of Project Titan, licensed exclusively to Apex Systems. The architecture is structurally bound to my developer credentials. When Julian threw a temper tantrum and Fiona aggressively purged my profile, the software recognized an unauthorized internal breach. It executed an automated defensive blackout. I turned directly to the wealthy investors. "I didn't hack you. Your vice president essentially unplugged the life support of your global supply chain because he wanted to punish a black woman who proved she was smarter than him. And your HR director rubber-stamped it without conducting a single technical audit." The boardroom erupted. Board members slammed their hands on the table, demanding Julian's immediate resignation. The chairman raised a hand, silencing the room once again. "What will it take to turn the system back on, Amara?" the chairman asked, addressing me by my first name as an equal. I stood tall. "The original beta contract is void. Apex Systems requires a $10 million emergency restoration fee, wired by 3:00 p.m. today. Furthermore, the annual licensing fee increases by 20%, locked into a mandatory 5-year contract." Julian gasped. "That's extortion, sir. You can't—" And I cut him off, my voice dropping to a dangerous chill. "I require the immediate termination of Julian and Fiona for gross negligence, no severance packages. If they are still in this building in 5 minutes, I take my software to your biggest competitor." The chairman didn't hesitate for a fraction of a second. He looked at Julian and Fiona with pure, unfiltered disgust. "You are both fired, effective immediately. Leave your badges on the table and get out of my boardroom," the chairman commanded, his voice booming with absolute finality. Fiona let out a choked sob, her hands shaking violently. She unclipped her badge, dropped it on the mahogany wood, and practically sprinted for the door, her corporate career completely in ruins. Julian remained paralyzed in his leather chair. He was losing his massive salary, his prestigious title, and his entire professional identity in front of the most powerful executives in the city. "Sir, you know my father," Julian pleaded, desperately reaching for his nepotism safety net. "He will pull his private investment capital if you do this." "Your father," the chairman replied with icy precision, "is a brilliant businessman. He will understand exactly why I am permanently severing ties with a massive liability who just cost this corporation $3 million in 48 hours. Security. 2 armed guards, the exact same ones who had escorted me out on Monday, entered the room. They grabbed Julian firmly by the arms. He thrashed and shrieked, entirely stripped of his unearned power, as they dragged him aggressively into the long hallway. The chairman turned back to me, the anger replaced by stark business pragmatism. "Draft the addendum immediately," he ordered his lead corporate attorney. "Give her the 20% fee increase within 20 minutes. The freshly printed, heavy legal documents were placed in front of me. I meticulously reviewed the clauses, ensuring the 5-year lock-in was ironclad, and signed my name in black ink. I opened my tablet, entered my secure override credentials, and hit execute. The massive digital projector behind me shifted. The flashing red warning signs vanished, replaced by a wave of solid green operational lights. The automated supply chain reconnected instantly. Dispatch communications restored. The room let out a massive collective sigh of relief. "It's an absolute pleasure doing business with you, Amara," the chairman said, shaking my hand firmly. "The pleasure is entirely mine," I replied smoothly. I packed my briefcase and walked out of the boardroom, an undisputed victor. Friday morning, I sat in my luxurious corner office at Apex Systems, sipping dark roast coffee. The financial news apps were buzzing with the massive headline, "Tech CEO Amara secures $40 billion Vanguard contract." My phone buzzed. It was the front desk security. "Ms. Amara, there are 2 individuals in the lobby demanding to see you. A Mr. Richard and a Ms. Sarah from Vanguard Logistics. They are highly agitated." I smiled. The trap I had quietly set was finally snapping shut. "Send them up." The elevator doors opened, and Vanguard's former CFO and Director of Procurement stepped into my executive suite. They didn't look like arrogant corporate elites anymore. Richard was pale and sweating, his expensive tie loosened. Sarah looked terrified, clutching a leather tote bag as if her life depended on it. "Amara." Richard started, his voice trembling as he bypassed any professional greetings. "When you restored Project Titan on Wednesday, your software initiated an automated data reconciliation process across all vendor accounts." "Yes," I replied calmly, leaning back in my chair. "Titan reconciles historical freight data to optimize future routes. It's a standard AI feature." Sarah stepped forward, her voice cracking. "It flagged the procurement accounts. It flagged the secondary vendor invoices Julian and I approved over the last 3 years. The system sent an automated anomaly report directly to the external auditors. The pieces fell perfectly into place. For years, I had suspected that Julian's bloated department budget wasn't just incompetence, it was malice. Julian, Sarah, and Richard had been setting up dummy vendor accounts, approving fake logistics invoices, and skimming millions of dollars off the top. They fired me because my AI system was getting too smart, too integrated, and they knew it would eventually expose their manual accounting fraud. "We need you to access the Apex servers and wipe the anomaly report," Richard begged, all his previous threats completely forgotten. "Delete the historical data from the last 3 years. We will pay you. Whatever you want." I looked at the people who had mocked me, stolen my credit, and tried to ruin my career to protect their own criminal enterprise. "I don't alter my proprietary algorithms," I stated coldly, "and I don't cover for thieves." "You have to help us," Sarah shrieked, her toxic arrogance replaced by sheer panic. "If the auditors see that data, we are going to federal prison." Right on cue, the heavy oak doors to my office swung open. David, the forensic auditor, walked in. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 2 stern-looking men in dark windbreakers, bearing federal badges. Richard froze, the blood completely draining from his face. Sarah let out a whimpering gasp and backed away toward the window. "The audit is already finished, Richard," David said, his voice entirely devoid of sympathy. "Once Project Titan restored the encrypted historical logs, my team traced every single dummy invoice directly to offshore accounts controlled by you, Julian, and Sarah. You embezzled over $6 million. The federal agents stepped forward, pulling out handcuffs. "Richard and Sarah, you are under arrest for corporate fraud and embezzlement. Your associate, Julian, was apprehended at his home 20 minutes ago." The 2 arrogant executives were read their rights, handcuffed, and marched out of my pristine office. They didn't scream or fight. They were completely broken by the catastrophic weight of their own greed. David stood in front of my desk, snapping his briefcase shut. He looked around my massive office and smiled. "Your software is brilliant, Amara. It took my team 2 days to manually verify what your AI caught in 10 seconds. I'm officially resigning from my firm today. The corporate politics are exhausting." I stood up and extended my hand. Apex Systems is expanding globally. David, we need a chief financial officer who actually understands forensic data integrity. The starting salary is double what Vanguard paid Richard. David shook my hand firmly. I accept. 6 months later, the corporate landscape had permanently shifted. Julian, Richard, and Sarah were awaiting federal sentencing, their careers and reputations entirely annihilated. Vanguard Logistics survived, but only because my software was steering their ship. Apex Systems grew into an untouchable global empire. I sat in my corner office, looking out over the city skyline, completely at peace. Sometimes, being fired and thrown out into the cold is the exact catalyst you need, because out there in the freezing corporate wilderness is exactly where you learn how to build an empire.